Some say the Christian life is difficult because there are so many rules. Others say the rules make it easier. Still others say there aren't many rules at all. With thousands of denominations out there, it's not surprising there are so many viewpoints. The awesome thing about God is that He's constant, all-loving, and willing to wait while we find our way. So, what exactly does it mean to be a Christian? And how are we to live a good Christian life? We tackle these questions and more as we go forward and live life with joy and on purpose.
Hello, I'm Jamie West. Welcome to our show. Today our discussion is going to be about transforming your heart. The discussion is based on a scripture in the Bible, Philippians 4, verse 8. And that verse reads as, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about those things." So here we are given an admonition to change the way our thoughts are. So let's go on to whatever is pure. One of the first scriptures you think about when you hear whatever is pure is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And that's Matthew chapter 5, 8. It's part of the Beatitudes. So we look for purity in our own hearts. And King David prayed for purity too, because he knew he had impure thoughts all the time. And so what they're saying here is we have to start changing our minds. We have to start thinking pure thoughts instead of impure thoughts. And we all have impure thoughts. We all make judgments on other people and say mean things in our head, even if we don't say them out loud. But God's trying to tell us to transform our heart. We have to change that way of thinking. We have to start looking at people and being non-judgmental, which is very difficult even now. You know, we are bombarded with opinions, especially in this day and age of technology and the internet and television shows and reality shows and all of that. We are bombarded every day with opinions. We have advertisements that are geared towards making us buy things. We have advertisements that are geared towards making us do things. We see political ads. Everybody is trying to influence our opinion. And businesses and political entities and television shows are trying to influence our opinion. And we are so used to it that we don't realize that some of that actually does influence our opinion. You know, they don't call television programming without reason. They are trying to program not only what we think, but how we react to what we're thinking. And Jesus is doing it too, and He has the Bible, and He shows us in the Bible how we overcome that programming, how we look at things from His perspective, from a perspective of unconditional love and righteousness. And so when we look at those things and we look at the world around us, and He's giving us this guideline on how to transform our hearts and how to transform our thoughts so that we think more like Him, and we look on people with a less judgmental way of looking and reacting to it. So whatever is pure means that we not only have to guard what comes into our minds, but we also have to guard what goes out of it. We have to guard what we say, but we also have to guard what we do. And He tells us over time, as we do it more and more, we do start becoming more pure. We start thinking better ways of doing things and better ways of seeing things. So when he tells us to be pure, he tells you to pray for a steadfast heart. Pray for a pure heart, just as King David did. Start thinking about what's coming out of your mouth. Start thinking about what you're thinking. Start looking at things with a different perspective. Instead of looking at things as, oh, they're trying to tell me something, look at it and say, why are they trying to change my opinion? When you start looking at all these ads that want you to buy, I mean, how many of us are inundated with ads on our social media? We're inundated with ads all around us. We're inundated with ads even on the road when we're driving. I mean, we're inundated with ads. Instead of looking at those ads and saying, oh, that looks kind of cool, maybe I will go buy that. Look at that ad and say, why do they want me to buy that? Do I need it? Is it something that will enhance my life? And that's where God is. God is telling you, look at everything around you. Instead of looking at it as trying to force you to a different opinion, look on it from God's opinion. So when you start thinking about what is pure, and when you start saying what is pure, when you start doing what is pure, what is righteous, what is noble, what is from the truth, you start transforming your heart all over again. You start changing into what Jesus wants you to be. You start striving to do what he wants us to do. And when we do that, we start looking at our fellow man as someone not as a person who is coming to change our minds or trying to change our world, but more as a person who is on the same path that we are on. They're just in a different place. When you start looking at why people do some of the things, you know, so many people, and in this society, we're basically taught to let our feelings all hang out. There's so many people act in such a bad way. And when you start looking at them from Jesus's perspective, when you start seeing that they are not trying to influence your opinion, they are actually coming, especially people who act in a bad way. If you start looking at them really closely, a lot of times their reaction comes from a position of hurt and anger and bitterness. And they have been hurt early and they've learned to respond that way. Somebody hurt them when they were young and they lashed out, and it worked to keep people away from them or to make people feel sorry for them or whatever. And so they continue doing it because that's the only way they know. But when we start looking at people with compassion, when we start using the purity in our hearts and the love that Jesus gave us to look at them, we don't see a person who's lashing out and doing bad things. We see a person whose needs were never met, whether they were younger or older. When you start looking at it from Jesus' perspective, you start seeing other people who do bad things as needs that were never met. I'm not talking about truly evil people, murderers, serial killers, all of that. I'm talking about people who just lash out all the time, or they're always angry, or they're always bitter. Well, you know what we're supposed to do with that? Keeping our hearts pure, being noble and selfless. We're supposed to look on those people and give them what they need. And what they need, you know what they need? They need love. And this is where Jesus is coming from. He tells us, he gave us one great commandment, to love one another. And so when we start transforming our hearts, when we start doing what is noble, what is true, what is righteous, what is pure, this is where our transformation starts happening. This is where we start looking at other people and ourselves. Don't forget, we've done a lot of bad things too. As we've gone through life, I'm sure that we've all lied. I'm sure that we've all done something mean to somebody. And we look back on that and we think, oh no, how could I have done that? And we dwell on things. And Christians do too. Christians dwell all the time on the things that they did wrong, and they never look at the things that they did right. And one of the things that Christians do, some of them can't move forward from the things that they did wrong. We know Christians like that. They just can't move forward. And sometimes they fall away from the church. And they do this because they can't look forward. They're looking backwards all the time. I did this, I did this, I did this. God's never going to accept what I did. Actually, God will. If you ask for forgiveness and you look forward on what you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to transform your life and how you're supposed to transform your heart. I mean, good grief, think about it. God took a murderer and made him a king. A murderer and made him a king. And he became one of the greatest kings. He became so beloved. And he had all of this terrible history in his past. But he transformed his life because of God. And everybody saw it. And they were like, we want some of that too. He became very well loved, despite all his trials and tribulations. So instead of looking at yourself as this flawed clay vessel, look at yourself as the silver and gold that God has made you from. And act righteously. Come forward with that. Go forward in your life with that. Start trying to reflect what Jesus has given you. Transform your heart. The next part of the scripture is, whatever is lovely. It's easy. Lovely is so easy. We see things that bring us joy. We see things that are pretty. We see a pretty person, a pretty child. We see a beautiful room. We see a beautiful flower. We look around the world, and he's telling us, look for what is lovely, because here's what happens when you see something pretty. Your brainwaves change. They become happy. When you see something beautiful, when you see something lovely, your brainwaves become happy, and it makes you, it uplifts your spirit. It makes you happier. So what he's telling us in this scripture is to look for what is lovely. Start taking joy in the things around you. Start looking at the things that you think are beautiful, because it uplifts you and it makes you feel better. And when you feel better, you treat the world better. You treat other people better. So he tells us to take joy, and I have to tell you, I take joy in nature. I enjoy being outdoors, and we just finished a trip to Glacier National Forest and Zion National Forest. And let me tell you, when you see some of the grandeur of these great, big, looming mountains, and both sets of mountains are completely different, and you're down there walking, and you're this little tiny human, and you see all this grandeur around you, it's really hard not to believe in God. And I mean, you just look at it and you're like, wow, this is glorious. This is fantastic. And so if you're a person who has had a lot of hurt in your life, and you know that your spirit is downtrodden, and you are having difficulty working on being a Christian, perhaps you should start with whatever is lovely. Start looking for the joyful things in life. Start looking at beautiful things. And it doesn't have to be nature. It can be anything. It's been interesting for me, because I got to tell you a little story. We've been cleaning out our garage. We're a military family, so we've had stuff packed for years, and we threw it all in the garage, and it's been there ever since. And I told my husband I need to start cleaning out the garage. We really just need to get to this stuff. If we haven't used it for the last 12 years since we lived here, it's time to look at it and decide whether we need to keep it. Well, amongst all of the crud that we ended up throwing out, I found some beautiful things. And one of the things I'd forgotten about was my mother-in-law made my daughters those little bed dolls, those little crocheted bed dolls that they used to make all the time. And I never thought much of them. She gave them to them for Christmas one year, and they put them on their beds and everything. And I never really paid attention to what was in their room, except, to make sure that they were well fed and had plenty of clothes and all of that. And I saw the dolls, but, I just didn't really think anything of them. I found the dolls. And they were dirty and smelly, and actually the dolls had deteriorated so much that I had to throw them away. But I didn't throw away the dresses. I took them in and I put them in the laundry and I washed them and fixed them up where there may have been a little bit of thread loose here and there. And when I brought them out of the washer and they were all clean and pretty and I set them on the bed, I realized, these are really pretty. They were really pretty. My mother-in-law had a real talent. And she chose colors that my girls liked. And these dolls, these dresses looked wonderful. And they had all kinds of ruffles and frou-frous and ribbons and things. And I thought, I'm going to take these and I'm going to make them back into what they were. So I had to find some dolls to put into them because, as I told you, the old dolls looked terrible. I found the dolls online. I ordered some dolls and I put them in the dresses and I set them on the bed, and it's just lovely. It's beautiful. And I'm looking at going, why did I never see this before? I guess I took it for granted. And look around your home. Sometimes there are things that you take for granted that you look at in a whole different prospect and in a whole different way. And you realize, you know what? That really is pretty. That really is nice. That really is lovely. And after I did it, I thought, my mother-in-law made something beautiful for my girls. She made something lovely. And I never noticed before. We've owned these dolls for, however many years. So it was transforming to me to look at something that I've had for 20 years and realize that it really is beautiful. But I'm just telling you, look around your home. There were things I'm sure that you bought that were lovely and that you take for granted. And look at your children in the same way. We love our kids. We all do. All of us who have children love our kids. But sometimes we do take them for granted. Sometimes they're always there. And we don't think about it too much, just making sure that their needs are met and they're loved and they're well taken care of and all of that. But sometimes you just need to see them in a different light. And on that respect, I have another little story. My daughter, when she was 16 years old, announced to us that she would like to go on an archaeological dig. And she found a company that would allow kids to go on an archaeological dig. And she just wanted to do it. And we were like, okay, all right, well, how much do we have to pay? Well, she applied for a little scholarship that they gave out, and we didn't have to pay as much as we thought. She actually won the scholarship because she had to write an essay. And apparently they chose her essay over other people's, and they gave her a half scholarship. So we only had to pay half. So she went out to Arizona somewhere and helped dig up a pueblo or something. And the first day that she was there, I told my husband, I thought they salted the site or something, because the first day she was there, they told her, go over in this corner and dig a wall. And she was away from all the others. She actually found a case of jewelry. And they were amazed. They descended upon her, and it was her very first day, her very first time. And she said she was digging with this little spoon thing, and they told her to start looking at this wall and just making sure that everything in it was correct, and to brush away with this little brush and this little spoon they gave her, and make sure that everything was all whatever. And she found this little hidden compartment that had all this jewelry in it. So everybody was pretty amazed. But the interesting thing about it was she went out on this trip on her own, and she was a shy, reserved child. And she's always had an interest in archaeology. We all do. And we had a lot of books around the house, so she's always had an interest. So she went out on this trip, and she was gone for a week. And when she came back, she was transformed. I told my husband, that's exact words I used. She was transformed. The world had opened up for her. She realized she could do things. She could do things on her own. She could do things without her family, and she could cope. And she just came back so confident and so changed by that experience. So when you look around, you can be changed by your experiences too. You can look at the furnishings that you put in your house and see what is lovely. You can look around and say, I did this. And your transformation and the joy that you felt when you did that, or when you bought that special furnishing or whatever, you can repeat it in your heart over and over again. And I realize I'm talking about material things right now, but God is telling you in this scripture, look at what is lovely. Look at what is lovely, either that you acquired or that He has put out there for you, because that uplifts your spirit. And when your spirit is uplifted, again, you are transformed. So the next part of the scripture is, whatever is admirable. Now, we can look at this kind of like, whatever is lovely. Okay, but whatever is admirable is usually something we apply to what other people do. And there are a lot of heroes that we all look up to, and heroines too. There's all kinds of people out there that have done great things. And God tells us to emulate them, to, be like they are. But it's really hard when you're just the ordinary person and you don't have a way to do something great and fantastic for the whole world. But again, it goes back to what our purpose is. And sometimes your purpose isn't to be great to thousands. Your purpose is to be great to one. And that's okay. And that one can be many different ones. You can have several little purposes. And it's still equated with whatever is admirable, because God tells us that. We're going to talk a little bit about King Solomon. King Solomon, everybody looks up to. He was the wisest man on earth. And when God installed him as king, the interesting thing about King Solomon is he didn't ask, when God said, what do you need, what tools do you need, whatever. He didn't ask God for stuff to enhance himself. Here's what he asked for. 1 Kings 3:9. He said, so give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? Solomon didn't ask for something for himself. Solomon did something noble. He asked for the ability to govern the people around him. He was selfless. Instead of asking for something for himself, he asked God for the ability to take care of these people around him. And God gave it to him. So when you start thinking about whatever is admirable, and we all admire King Solomon, once again, King Solomon, we admire him because of that selfless and noble act that he did. So when you look around the world, and sometimes you have to do things that you don't like to do, and sometimes you do things that you like to do. But when you go forth in the world today with this transformed heart, you need to not only look at what is admirable, but you need to do what is admirable. So he tells us whatever is admirable. When you're going out in the world today, sometimes you make decisions, and you need to also look at it as not looking for the glory for that decision. A lot of times now, as a Christian, I see things happening and I just try to do the right thing right then and there and then wander on. I don't stop to accept praise. Now, don't get me wrong, I like praise as much as the next guy. And I love it when people say, oh, you did such a wonderful thing, because we all do. We like being validated. But at the same time, sometimes there's something you need to do that is admirable, that you need to do it and just move on. And I am reminded of this, again, by a little story. So, I'm on a forum that is about the national parks, because I love the national parks and we try to visit as much as we can when we are in the general vicinity. And a woman came on and she said that her and her husband decided they were going to go to the national park, and they were going to go to, I think, Glacier. I don't even remember which park it was. But anyhow, her husband decided to get one of those satellite positioning systems that hikers use. And she's like, why? We're fit, we're healthy, everything's good. And he said, I don't know, I just feel like I need to get one. So he got one and they had it. And they went hiking. And they were up some trail, 5 miles up some trail they were hiking, and they came upon a hiker with a broken ankle. He had fallen and he had broken his ankle. And all of a sudden, the reason he bought that global positioning system was so that they could call for help for this man. And they ended up being in the right place at the right time with something that could help somebody else. And the guy ended up being helicoptered out. I'm not exactly sure how. I don't know all the details. And then they went on with their hike. And I was like, whoa, that's like kind of cool, because, you know, instead of sticking around and having praise heaped on them and everything, once he was in the helicopter, off they went and continued their hike. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool, because, you know, most people would have like stuck around. I shouldn't say most people, but some people would have stuck around and waited for the praise and the glory and all of that. Instead, she talked about the hike and the pictures they took and all of that, and she posted the pictures and everything. And I just thought that was kind of a cool thing. How many of us do that? How many of us do something cool, wonderful, right, and then just move on without expecting any accolades at all? Now, she did post it on the forum, but it was as an afterthought. She was telling us her husband bought this GoPro, they went on a hike, they met this hiker with a broken leg, or broken ankle. They got help for him and they went on. So I just found that admirable. And so when we're doing something admirable, we need to look on it as something that just needs to be done. You just need to do the right thing and move on. And whatever accolades come afterwards, or if none ever do, we don't need to worry about it, because we are happy because we did something that was righteous in the Lord. The way our heart transforms as we go through this, looking for this righteousness, looking for this admirability, looking for this truth, looking for what is noble, pretty soon we don't need the praises of the people around us. That's one of the cool things too. As you go forward with this transformation in your heart, you're not going to need the praises of the people around you. The only praise you want is from God. And you want to make sure that in your mind and in your heart, you can say, I did the right thing. And the fallout from that doesn't matter, because you're transforming. You're transforming your heart yet again.
On Purpose is funded through sponsor support. We thank you for your generosity. To donate or to learn more about sponsorships and the On Purpose mission, visit www.pelicast.net. If you have questions or comments about this program, email us at suggestionbox@pelicast.net.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Join us next week as we tackle yet another tough issue from a Christian perspective.